Her jaw slackened, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. I remember the hum of the crystal chandeliers, the muted clink of champagne flutes, and the low murmur of overdressed guests. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with a synthetic perfume, a stark contrast to the scent of rain and freshly turned earth I had come to appreciate. My former wife, Lyra, stood beside Theron, her arm looped possessively through his, a diamond glittering on her finger with a blinding intensity that mimicked her ambition. She was laughing, a sound that always grated on my nerves, even in happier times. Tonight, it resonated with a particular triumphant quality. She had everything she had ever openly coveted: wealth, status, and the public adoration that came with associating with a man like Theron. Her eyes, as they occasionally swept over the room, held a thinly veiled contempt for anyone who hadn't climbed as high as she believed she had. When her gaze briefly met mine across the opulent expanse, there was no recognition, only a dismissive flicker, as if I were a ghost she had long since buried. Yet, I stood there, calm amidst the shimmering illusion, a quiet smile playing on my lips. They believed they were celebrating their victory, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this elaborate facade was merely the calm before a very different kind of storm. I held a secret, not a weapon of destruction, but a blueprint for rebirth. My journey to that ballroom, to that moment of tranquil defiance, began long before the cancer diagnosis, long before Lyra's calculated abandonment. I was always Orion, the architect who saw cities not just as concrete jungles, but as living organisms, breathing ecosystems. Sustainable design wasn't just a trend for me. It was a philosophy, a creed I lived by. I believed in structures that served humanity and the planet, buildings that whispered stories of harmony, not just monuments to profit. Lyra, however, saw the world through a different lens. When we first met, her ambition was a spark, an attractive drive that I mistook for passion. She claimed to admire my ideals, my dedication to a craft that prioritized purpose over the bottom line. But as years passed, that spark morphed into a raging fire of consumerism. My modest, albeit comfortable, earnings were never enough. She yearned for the glittering world of high society, the endless designer labels, the elite circles where connections were currency. I tried to bridge the gap, to show her the beauty in simplicity, the richness in meaningful work, but her eyes were fixed on a distant, more opulent horizon. I sacrificed my evenings, my weekends, trying to meet her ever-growing demands, often taking on less fulfilling, albeit more lucrative, projects to furnish the life she desperately craved. I silenced the quiet voice inside me that whispered about my true calling, believing that her happiness would eventually become my own. Then, at 38, the whispers stopped. The world fractured. The diagnosis was a rare, aggressive form of cancer. My vision of a future dedicated to revolutionary, green architecture shattered. The shock, the fear, the crushing weight of uncertainty, it was overwhelming. But Lyra's reaction was a different kind of wound. There were no tears, no shared sorrow, only a cold, calculating assessment of the situation. My illness, she declared, was an insurmountable financial burden. It was a dead end for her luxurious aspirations, a catastrophic detour on her relentless pursuit of wealth and status. The coldness in her eyes was more chilling than any prognostic report. Without hesitation, she abandoned me. She moved swiftly, seamlessly into the orbit of Theron, a real estate mogul whose notoriety was only surpassed by his immense wealth. Lyra, ever the pragmatist in her own twisted logic, believed she had secured her ultimate prize. I was left alone, facing chemotherapy, endless medical consultations, and the profound, aching emptiness of betrayal. She expected me to fade into obscurity, to descend into poverty, a cautionary tale of a man who dared to dream of a better world while she conquered the real one. But even then, in the sterile confines of an oncology ward, a different kind of blueprint began to form in my mind. The pain of my body, the desolation of my heart, it all coalesced into a molten core of resilience. I couldn't control the cancer, but I could control my response to it. This was my hidden strength, my secret weapon, an innovative, eco-friendly architectural design that promised to revolutionize urban living. I called it Viridian City. It wasn't just a building. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem nested within a towering structure. A vertical forest, a living organism designed to purify air, generate power, and fostered community within its walls. I spent my darkest hours, between bouts of nausea and fatigue, sketching, calculating, researching. My laptop became my sanctuary, my refuge from the stark reality of my illness. I poured every ounce of my frustration, every flicker of hope, every memory of Lyra's dismissive gaze into its intricate details. I connected with former colleagues and mentors who still believed in my vision, albeit remotely, cautiously. They provided feedback, resources, and, most importantly, a belief in something bigger than my immediate despair. This wasn't a desperate whim. It was a meticulously crafted vision, refined by the crucible of my suffering. My recovery became intertwined with the project's development. Each small victory in my health mirrored a breakthrough in the design. I was forging not just a concept, but a testament to an indomitable spirit, built brick by painful brick, line by meticulous line, in the quiet solitude of my recovery. Lyra, meanwhile, basked in the glow of her opulent engagement, publicly celebrating her supposed triumph, utterly oblivious to the quiet revolution I was orchestrating in the shadows. She saw my silence as surrender, my absence as proof of her victory. I let her believe it. It was, after all, part of my plan. The silence was a deliberate choice, a strategic withdrawal. As Lyra flaunted her new life, I retreated further into the world of Viridian City. My communication was minimal, my public presence almost non-existent. I let her believe I was drowning, consumed by illness and financial ruin. This allowed me to work without interference, without the spotlight, securing patents, assembling a lean but brilliant team of engineers and sustainability experts, and, most critically, engaging with a few select, forward-thinking investors who shared my vision for a truly green future. These were not the flash-in-the-pan venture capitalists, they were titans of industry who understood the long game, who saw the immense potential in a truly sustainable urban model. I remember the hushed meetings, the late-night simulations, the painstaking refinements of the Viridian City concept. Every detail mattered. My team and I worked under strict non-disclosure agreements, a shroud of secrecy guarding our innovation. Lyra would occasionally send a passive-aggressive text, a thinly veiled inquiry about my progress, always laced with an assumption of my continued decline. I would reply with polite, non-committal answers, fueling her belief that I was indeed fading into obscurity. This unwitting arrogance on her part was a crucial component of my strategy. She saw my quiet as weakness, my resilience as non-existent. She was so convinced of her own triumph, so consumed by the superficial glow of her new life, that she never once considered that I might be building something far more substantial than her fleeting happiness. I was not just recovering, I was rebuilding brick by painful brick, not just my life, but a future that would render her entire existence utterly irrelevant. The stage was being set not for her grand entrance, but for my quiet, undeniable resurgence. The climax arrived, as planned, at the charity gala hosted by Theron's conglomerate, an event Lyra had painstakingly orchestrated to be her grand debut as the mogul's fiancée. The ballroom, the same one where I had stood merely as a forgotten ex, now shimmered with an even greater intensity, the air thick with the scent of money and ambition. Lyra, draped in a gown that must have cost a small fortune, glowed with a self-satisfied brilliance beside Theron. I had arrived earlier, mingling discreetly, a ghost in plain sight. My name had been quietly added to the guest list through one of my new investors, a subtle maneuver that went unnoticed by Lyra. The main event of the evening was a series of presentations on future urban development projects, a segment Theron was particularly proud of. He took the stage, his voice booming with practiced confidence, introducing a series of conventional, albeit large-scale, designs. Lyra watched from their VIP table, nodding approvingly, her expression a mix of pride and proprietorship. Then Theron announced the final presentation, mentioning a revolutionary concept that his company was proud to unveil. Lyra's eyes, along with those of the entire elite gathering, turned towards the stage as the lights dimmed. A gigantic screen descended, and a sleek, futuristic logo appeared, Viridian City. A collective gasp rippled through the room. My project. My creation. Theron began to speak, his words carefully chosen, though a flicker of confusion crossed his face. He explained how this project, Viridian City, represented the future of sustainable urban living, how it would redefine skylines, and promised unprecedented environmental benefits. His company, he declared, was investing heavily, spearheading its global rollout. Then he paused and his eyes scanned the room, searching. "We are honored to have the visionary architect behind this groundbreaking concept with us tonight," he announced, his voice momentarily faltering as if he hadn't fully grasped the significance until that very moment. "Please welcome Mr. Orion Hayes." Every eye in the room pivoted. Lyra's head snapped towards me, her smile freezing, then crumbling into a mask of utter disbelief. Her jaw slackened, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. I rose from my inconspicuous table, my movements calm, deliberate. A soft spotlight found me as I walked towards the stage, every step filled with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced death and chosen life. I met Lyra's gaze across the room. The smug superiority had vanished, replaced by dawning horror, then, unmistakably, panic. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. Theron, now fully comprehending the identity of the visionary architect, looked equally stunned, a mixture of professional awe and personal awkwardness flooding his features. As I reached the stage, I offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod to Theron, acknowledging his company's involvement, then turned to face the mesmerized audience. The murmur in the room grew louder, a wave of shock and recognition washing over the gathered elite. Lyra sat frozen, her face pale, the vibrant glow of moments before extinguished, replaced by the stark, public mirror reflecting the true cost of her betrayal. My return was not a whisper, it was a declaration, a powerful, undeniable truth unveiled in the most public of arenas. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of hushed conversations and stunned reactions. As I delivered a concise, powerful presentation on Viridian City, detailing its innovative features and global potential, Lyra remained utterly motionless at her table, a statue of public humiliation. Her face, usually so composed, was a canvas of disbelief, then fury, and finally, a profound, chilling despair. I could feel her eyes on me, burning with a mixture of hatred and dawning regret, a stark contrast to the quiet admiration and intrigue emanating from the rest of the room. Theron, initially flustered, quickly regained his composure, joining me on stage to shake my hand, his professional demeanor overriding any personal astonishment. He understood the magnitude of the project and, I suspect, the political implications of standing beside its creator. But for Lyra, the fallout was immediate and devastating. As I stepped off stage, a crowd converged around me. Investors, architects, city planners, all eager to speak, to congratulate, to shake my hand. Lyra, however, found herself increasingly isolated. Her attempts to regain her composure and join Theron were awkward, her forced smiles failing to mask the raw mortification. I saw whispers ripple through her social circle, glances exchanged, and once adoring acquaintances now looking at her with a mixture of pity and judgment. Later that evening, a brief, hushed argument erupted between Lyra and Theron, barely audible but visibly tense. Theron's face was stern, his gestures dismissive. I watched from a distance as he eventually turned his back on her, walking away to address a group of business associates, leaving Lyra standing alone, abandoned amidst the glittering crowd she had so desperately sought to conquer. The irony was not lost on me. Her pursuit of wealth had led her to abandon me, and now, my quiet pursuit of purpose had publicly unraveled her carefully constructed world, leaving her bereft of the very status she craved. The shock on the faces of others, particularly those who knew our past, was palpable, a mixture of awe at my resurgence and a clear, unspoken condemnation of Lyra's choices. She had betrayed not just me but the very values that now shone so brightly in the public eye. Months have passed since that gala, and the echoes of that evening have settled into a new, harmonious rhythm in my life. Viridian City is no longer just a concept on paper, it is a burgeoning reality. Pilot projects are underway in several major cities, and the global response has been overwhelmingly positive. I am no longer just Orion, the architect. I am Orion, the visionary, a leader in the global shift towards sustainable urbanism. My days are filled with purpose, collaboration, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing my long-held dreams materialize. The financial security that Lyra once deemed paramount is now an effortless byproduct of my passion, not its driving force. My health, too, has stabilized, a testament to what the human spirit can overcome when fueled by a profound sense of purpose. I have found a profound peace, a sense of wholeness that was absent even before my diagnosis. I am surrounded by a community of like-minded individuals who value integrity, innovation, and genuine connection over superficial status. Lyra's story, I hear, took a different turn. Theron, a shrewd businessman, quickly distanced himself from any perceived liabilities. Her engagement ended, and without the reflected glow of his immense wealth, her carefully curated social standing began to crumble. The calls from her friends dwindled, the invitations ceased. She is, from what I understand, no longer a fixture in the circles she so desperately aspired to, forced to confront a life stripped of the very opulence she had pursued so relentlessly. Her silence now is not strategic, it is the silence of an echo, a void where a superficial dream once resided. My journey taught me that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in creation, not in external validation, but in internal resilience. It's about finding your quiet strength in the face of adversity, recognizing that betrayal can be a catalyst for unparalleled growth, and understanding that the greatest revenge is simply living well, on your own terms. Never underestimate the power of a quiet comeback, for it is often in the darkest hours that our most brilliant light is forged, transforming pain into purpose and leaving an indelible mark on the world, far beyond the reach of those who once sought to dim your flame.